Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted on this episode to have a second chat with comics creator artist Dan Brereton. Dan, thank you for jumping in, joining. There's a large bat behind you. I feel the need to
Yes,
point that
there
out.
is.
Yes.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. Love the
Never a dull
ambiance.
moment
And
in
I
the
see some
studio.
boxes over there. So there's a Kickstarter campaign happening, I believe, as well, or a crowdfunder at
Uh,
least.
yeah, it's a very much a working studio. It's not a gigantic studio, so there's a lot of things piled on top of things. And yeah, so when there are always boxes because there's always things leaving the studio, things coming in, but hopefully more leaving than coming in. But yeah, so I'm actually kind of a box hoarder to a certain
Oh,
degree, where
nice, nice. Mhm.
if I see a box that I think I can ship some artwork or a book in that, then I kind of tend to hang on to it. But for a Kickstarter, you have to, you have to visit the Uline store usually. But
Mhm.
anyway, yeah. So welcome to my studio, and thank you for having me on your show.
Well, thank you so much for joining, connecting. As I mentioned, this is our second talk. Our first talk was more of kind of a 3,000 foot view of your creating, so I'll just give some love to the projects that you're known for, particularly Nocturnals being one of those that people know you best for. And I'm also a big fan of the Elseworlds work that you did as well. You have one of those styles that can be spotted across the room. It's really unique, and appreciate a lot about what you bring to the page.
Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. I've, I kind
Absolutely.
of, I kind of miss doing Elseworlds stuff. I think they were outlawed by DC Comics around the turn of the century, if you can say that, and haven't really done that since. But it was fun to be able to come up with an alternate reality concept, and then they would say, "Yeah, okay, go."
Hmm.
I think that's
Hmm.
the main thing that's fun about comics in general is that when you come up with something unique, hopefully, and you get the chance to do it. So now, rather than trying to pitch to one publisher or another, if I really feel strongly about something, I can kind of do it on my own through crowdfunding. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask for folks out there that may be uninitiated, what kind of approach, what are the things that you keep in mind when you're creating?
um you know to be honest, it's kind of like it's just like a tap that you can't really turn it off. Ideas
Mm-hmm.
will come from any different direction. I think when you enjoy media, when you enjoy reading, watching movies, TV shows, comics, um, try, that kind of stuff is very inspirational. Life is inspirational.
Hmm.
Um, you know, as an artist, you get inspired by the world around you. Your imagination kind of feeds off of all those things, and then what kind of bubbles to the top comes through the spigot. And you can't, like I said, you can't really turn it off. So ideas for characters and stories are kind of coming all the time, and you can sit there and fill your sketchbooks and your notebooks with things, which I have, and you can only get so much of it out into the world.
Hmm.
Um, and so where it comes from is less important to me than it and what I do with it when it comes, and sussing out what I feel strongly about. So if there's a story idea in mind that really grabs onto me, um, then I'm going to try and develop it some way. At least as a pitch or as a group of characters. And I have sketchbooks that are full of armies of characters that for different ideas of things I wanted to do. And it's not always things that I want to draw myself. Sometimes it's things I want to work with, want to collaborate with another artist on, you know,
Cool.
um, that can be tougher to do. It seems like it's easier for some writers and creators to do than others. It's not been something I'm particularly adept at making it happen. But I do try because you can't do anything else. It's just like I said, it's involuntary. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's a community, a creative community.
yeah, I think one of the things about comics is really so great is that yeah, you can be your own, you can do it all.
Hmm.
If you have those skill sets, you can do it all. I mean, you can even be your own letterer, you can lay out your own stuff. There's people who've been doing that for a long time. but the idea of collaboration with people who are excellent, working together for a common goal, whether it's because they were all hired by the same editor to work on one title, or because they really believe in what they're doing and they all have like a kind of a stake in it creatively, is a really awesome thing. And you can't necessarily do that with all medium. I mean, writers definitely work together on things all the time. I'm friends with quite a few writers that collaborate, and I've collaborated with writers on prose stuff. So I mean, I definitely have done that as well, and being able to kind of hash ideas out and kind of bounce off of another person or persons is amazing fun for
Hmm.
sure.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's also in some ways it's also more comforting, because when you're doing something alone, um, you're not necessarily in a vacuum. You have friends and you have family and other people you can kind of bounce off of, but you sort of everything's sort of up to you. You know, it's you're the final arbiter of what's going to go on the page, and and it doesn't scare me necessarily. It's not scary or anything like that, but there are times when I do want someone to take a look at something and tell me what they think, and I don't ask just anybody, because you know what I mean. Like, you want to ask people that you trust.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, if you're working with someone else on an idea, you have this back and forth all the time, and you know, something that you think is a great idea may not work. Something that your partner thinks is a great idea, you may see the benefit in changing it, or getting rid of it, and vice versa. Sometimes that's a whole other thing, because then you're not necessarily butting heads, but you have to have a calm discussion about why something works or doesn't work.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess that's the upside of being your own boss on your own project, is that you can have that interior monologue with yourself. So you come out a winner either way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not that it's about winning and losing, but but I enjoy all aspects of making stories. So
Yeah, yeah. Now you talked about kind of the faucet not being able to turn off. I'm curious about the flow and the world that you've created in a book that I've seen advertised around on social media, and that's Phantom Fatale. Curious about that work.
I had not done an art book since By the Blade, which was the last art book at crowdfunded through Kickstarter that came out in 2022. And last year, I didn't do any Kickstarter projects. I was doing some other things instead. I was working on finishing, working on my Nocturnals graphic novel that I work on when I can. It's all penciled, but I'm finishing the pages
Mhm.
when I can fit that in. I have a Patreon page that's very busy. That's where I focus most of my commission work. I also did two comic art live chat and art sale shows with Bill Cox from Comic Art Fans last year. And so that was a lot of doing work on spec, just kind of sitting down and taking a month or two and saying, okay, I'm going to make all these pieces, and then they're going to be available to the buyers and collectors, and coming up with those ideas for what I was going to do on my own, rather than being commissioned to do a specific character. And that was really fun. I really had a good time doing that. And I would say 85 to 90% of the stuff that I created did sell.
Mhm. Mhm.
Even if it was stuff that I thought was a little esoteric, or that maybe wouldn't be that popular. I mean, so that was really fun, and I didn't really need to do a Kickstarter. Um, but I started getting antsy and realizing that next year I probably was going to have to do it. And so I had, first of all, get myself geared toward doing that again, because I dropped away for a year, and that was like the Kickstarter muscles were needed to be worked a little bit. They got a little not atrophied, but it just weren't as supple as they were in like the last 10 years of just doing them
Yeah.
one after the other.
Hmm.
So I had all this material, and when I sat down, I had 3 books worth of material easily. And so I
Wow.
had to parse out everything and create 3 different themes, um, because I like to have a theme for what I'm doing. I don't just do Art of Dan Brereton volume 8 or 9, because I think that's kind of boring. So there's always some kind of a theme. So Phantom Fatale was a title I came up with after many, many, many lists of titles. And to me, I want a title for an art book to be evocative of something that I'm presenting. I've
Hmm.
already done
Hmm.
most of the work. By the Blade was a no-brainer. It was sword and sorcery characters, or any character that carries a sword or a sharp object, whether it's a samurai warrior, or a sword slinging barbarian, or that in that vein. And that was a lot of fun. And there was a lot of stuff that I'd held on to that I held back from putting in other books. And there were some things I featured again. And then because I was inspired, I did new work to put into the book to kind of round out the theme. And for this one, I had enough stuff. I had a lot of nocturnals work that I'd done, and commission work and things like that. And so this book is more, I think, a tribute to, like I say, pulp and pulchritude, which is, the female form as portrayed in genre fiction, or female characters who are a little darker, not super dark, but a little darker, a little more dangerous. Something you might see me do more often than not. And then character, then monster characters and sort of the darker stuff. It's not a horror book per se. It's still very much about adventure characters and things like that. But it's definitely different from the last book I did, and there's definitely a clear delineation. But I wanted something that evoked a feeling, and that same goes with the cover. So I always do a new cover for every art book, and so they kind of go together. And again, I had different ideas for what that was going to look like, and then I had some pretty ambitious, lots of figures kind of thing. And I thought, why do I have to do 5 figures on the cover? I don't have to do that. I could just do one, So I settled on 3 instead. And that worked really well. And I felt like, okay, that's solid. It's simple, but also it says that there's work involved. And, I don't know, it's kind of like this, it's a kind of a seat of the pants thing that you sort of feel your way through. And after doing it several times, I mean, I don't know if this is my 10th art book or something like that I've done in the last decade. You get a feeling for what at least for what interests me and what I find worthy of my time, because you really have to, you are dedicating so much of your time to a project like this, that you really do need to immerse yourself in it and find something in it that grabs you and holds on. And I definitely feel like I have this. And as soon as you launch, you start to see that other people have also gravitated, and they're all latched onto it as well. And then of course that you're even more invested in making it as great as you can. So that's another thing about Kickstarter that's really cool, is you don't really necessarily have that when you're working on something in a traditional sense through like a publisher with, you're working with your editor, obviously, and maybe your writer or somebody, who's a collaborator, and you guys can get excited about that, but you're not supposed to show the public. You don't unveil it till it's like ready to go and be solicited through Diamond. And so a lot of it's hush hush. What are you working on now? What are you working on now? That used to be the question everyone asked. I'd have something brand new sitting on the table, brand spanking new Nocturnals graphic novel sitting on the table at a convention. They'd walk over and go, "Oh, cool." And then the second question, or the first question, is, "What are you working on now?" And that used to make me crazy after a while. It's like, well, I just did this. Could you maybe check this out? This is what I really, that should be the answer. What are you doing right now? This, presenting this to you. I came out of my cave and, and to see the light of day. And now I'm inviting you to come and see what I've been working on. And I think that's kind of what it is. And that's a huge component of being, I hesitate to say the word artist, because I was just telling my wife, I don't really know exactly what that means, but to be an illustrator or a storyteller, to be a creative person who wants to tell stories, you have to have an audience. You have to have someone who's there, and it's not just you. I mean, you're like your first component of your audience, but then everybody else is the rest. And you hope that not necessarily that you're catering to them. I mean, there are people that do it very well, or at least have the audience foremost in their mind, when they're creating something. But I think you always have to make yourself happy first. And I don't think that's a novel concept. I think most creators will tell you that. And then you just kind of hope that other people will sort of like click in, they'll lock into what you're doing, and everyone kind of gets it. And when you have a really good first day, we had a really good first day with this Kickstarter. I was like, I breathed a sigh of relief, because I realized that I hadn't, that there were people that were on board with me. And that's always a great feeling. And it's very inspirational.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were talking before we hit record about how you love art books, and we were talking about the kind of books we enjoy. So, talking about kind of creating the things that you, as the primary audience, get to enjoy. That's just the perfect fit. That's what's on the way.
Yeah, I think I mean, I am kind of crazy about art books, and it's like I was saying before, when I discover an artist who either was completely unfamiliar with or someone whose work I liked, and then saw more of it, and this started to kind of the wheel starts turning, and like, is there a book? Does this person have a book out? And
Mhm.
so I'll go look, and then if there's a book and it's not a $500, out of print book, I'm going to try and get it. In fact, I'm going to try and turn on some of my other friends to it as well. Um,
Absolutely.
and then it gets added to the crammed books. And I wish I could just turn it over so you could see one of my bookshelves. It's just, no room left on any of them for anything. Um, but that's where the inspiration comes from, and I don't think that's ever going to change. But to be able to create a book is is again, it's really just that thing of wanting to share with people. And
Hmm.
uh, and I used to be that I would go to shows and I would make these prints of the commission pieces I'd done or any pieces I'd done. I'd make like color Xeroxes, okay, and I'd have like these 8.5 by 11 color Xeroxes that I'd make because a lot of people wanted something that was in color, but they couldn't necessarily afford to have you do a painting at a convention, and I didn't have time to do one for everybody anyway. And so I had all these color pieces, and then people were very interested in buying them. Then I made them bigger. I made 11 by 17. I still do that at shows. And people would say, you should make a book. And I thought, well, I can make a book, but then a person's getting 150 or 100 images in one book,
Hmm.
whereas I'm selling these are $5 or $10 a piece or more. It was like, it didn't really seem like it was, I don't know, financially or from a business point of view. But then that's what I do is I make books. I mean, when you're making comic stories, you're making a book in some fashion. So the first time I had a sketchbook out, it was just a black and white stapled book, 8.5 by 11 book. Um, that was a really neat thing. And then went to color. My first color art book was with Image. It's a book called The Goddess and the Monster. And I don't know if you can still get it. I think it's out of print now, but it came out in like 2010. And I was really happy with that. And I had help from the designer who works at Image, Drew, who's really great. And I was really happy with the way that came out. And did another one like a year or two later with my friend Steve Morger, who's the big wow art fella. And
Hmm.
we did several together after that. And then we did the Nocturnals graphic novel that came out, Sinister Path. And we will probably work together on the next graphic novel. But at a certain point, because he had so many artists that were coming to him and saying, will you help me put an art book out through Kickstarter? He got sort of inundated. And by that time, I had kind of learned the ropes. So I went off and was doing them on my own,
Hmm.
um, which was great because it's a good skill to have. And I wish other artists would feel less trepidation about trying it. I know there's a lot of people who it's just not their thing to conduct a campaign. And I feel like if I can do it, they sure as hell can do it,
Hmm.
but maybe it just takes a certain temperament or something. Some people are more, uh, they're happy to let someone else work with them. And I think that's fine too. If you find someone you trust to help you put something out, um, then you should do that. Because I think when I see all these art books, that's one thing that does connect with me is these artists they left behind some document of their work.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
and a lot of artists who I admire like my peers, they don't have that. And they should.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
they really should. And they should be doing it as much as they can. As long as there is an audience for it, it should be happening. Um, because what happens when you put out this body of work from a whole career that's maybe 30 to 60 years long or longer, and
Hmm.
you don't have anything to show for it, and someone comes along maybe after you're gone and puts out a book, but it wasn't something that you had a hand in. So do it now while you can you know
Yeah. Yeah. I love that encouragement. And you're absolutely right. Folks that are creating should be celebrated. And art books are a great way to do that. So glad that you are making use of that medium, sharing the creative vision. I'm sure will be a particular link that you'll share with me that I can post up here or in the podcast description so
yeah,
that folks can
Yeah.
go and check it out. Any other places that I know there was another talk on Dollar Bin Bandits that was live, and I really enjoy their show, so I want to plug that. But
Yeah.
any other places that folks can go to kind of follow the path and find out where to go to see the work?
Well, I have I have several pages on Facebook. I've got a public page, my personal page, and then I have other pages. Every time I do a Kickstarter, I try to launch a page for it on Facebook, so it becomes
Mhm.
a central thing. And then you also hope that you can get people to come on there, and then, in fact, one of the Facebook pages that was for an art book maybe 7 years ago, I kept changing the title every time I did a new book. This time around, I can't get the title changed. It's still says By the Blade, but it should say Phantom Fatale. But that is my kind of my headquarters for the Kickstarter, and so there's plenty of places to find me on Facebook. I've got an Instagram page, Dan Brereton Illustrator. I posted that pretty regularly. People who are subscribed to me on Patreon have different levels. The first level we call Haunt, which basically you can see what I'm working on in the studio. So a lot of times you see stuff before anyone else does. I do process galleries to kind of show you the steps I'm doing. Always open for questions and comments. And some of the tiers that go from there are tiers where you actually get a piece of artwork at the end of the year,
Mhm.
which has
Mhm.
been a great way for me to manage my commission list through that way. And that way I don't overextend myself. Um, so that's a pretty cool thing. I mean, and there's a free option too, but I don't post as much that I try to. But I also try to give love to the people who are really supporting the work, which is it's an amazing thing.
Mhm.
The way that artists can um, find support, or whether it's enthusiasm or enthusiasm that translates to funding, is an amazing thing, because there's a lot of artists out there who I think don't necessarily fit into the mold of the sort of the average freelancer,
Mhm.
who's
Mhm.
working on a book and he's working steadily every month. He's got deadlines and he's going to do this and this, which is a great thing. But even artists that do work that way, they also have their own personal projects, and it's great to be able to kind of uh, commune with an audience. And
Yeah.
that was one of the first things that attracted me to Kickstarter. Was I have an idea, I put it out there, and I've backed over 160 projects, so I know what I'm talking about. I see
Yeah.
something that grabs me, and I'm like, I like that, I want to support it.
Yeah.
Whether I'm going to support it by getting a digital copy of the book, or I want a hardcover, and I want a hardcover with a sketch, or whatever it is I want. And I think that's another thing too, is those tiers where you can get these rewards are so cool. You know,
Mhm.
um, and you're directly benefiting the creator.
Yeah.
There's not all these middlemen and distribution people and all these other things in the way necessarily. And that's a cool thing too. And people, when they want to talk to me about something, they can contact the campaign, and more often than not, they're talking to me. So it's pretty
Yeah.
cool. But yeah, I'm easy to find
Definitely.
online.
Cool. Cool. And
Definitely easy to.
oh, sorry.
No, no, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say it's a very cool time with comics and being able to connect that way, and as you said, supporting creators firsthand. And you were saying you are easy to find online, so this is
Yeah,
even better.
yeah. There's so many comics that are being done in Kickstarter. I mean, and that are successful.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing, and the board game thing. It's. I mean, that's another thing I'm really interested in too. I actually have a game that I've developed with the very talented game designer named Scott Rogers, and we've actually come up with a couple of ideas for games. But one of them is a nocturnal game that we we're talking about crowdfunding that ourselves, and it's new territory for me, and it's new territory for Scott to be able to do something like that, because I know the ins and outs of doing a printed book
Mhm.
Kickstart,
Mhm.
doing a board game. That's a whole other thing. Although we do have about, as far as the game goes, we have about 95% of it finished and ready to go. And I can't wait to talk more about that when we have a concrete sort of path ahead of us to make that happen. And we have a path. We're on the path, but we need to now establish the path to crowdfunding this thing. And
Yeah.
again, you could always go through, you could, pitch it to a publisher and work with a gaming publisher, and they have all the stuff, their ducks are already in a row, but then you don't have the control.
Yeah.
So you want the control, then you have to kind of roll the dice, and you have to sort of get out there and get your hands, roll your sleeves up. So,
And you have the chance to be creative with these different ways of making and storytelling that
yeah,
for other venues would be a very complicated conversation, I'm
yeah.
sure.
To do I mean, my big goal for gaming is to do like a dungeon crawl type of situation where you've got characters and you've got sort of situations, which are basically, like setting up a story, setting up the characters, and then letting the player go in, and which seems to be so popular these days.
Hmm.
It's more
Hmm.
popular than reading comics, is to go in and be immersed in an adventure. uh, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was in high school in the 80s, and that was the fun part. Was I create these characters that I was doing in my comics as a teenager, and then I could play them in a Dungeons and Dragons setting, and that was really great to kind of exercise your imagination. But then the people who are playing with you, they're doing the same thing. They're exercising their imaginations, and they're immersed in the story. As an illustrator or a writer, you're already immersing yourself in the story. I
Yeah.
think when you're doing just a drawing, if you're doing any kind of illustration, where you put this character in a situation, you kind of need to put yourself in there and imagine yourself in this world and what it would be like. And that's kind of a prerequisite for creating and also participating in gaming and role playing stuff. So I hope that we get a chance to do that down the road too, with some really cool miniatures and things like that. That's it. I got captivated by that whole thing uh, about 5 years ago, and
Yeah.
I still want to do it. So
Yeah, yeah, I would love to see that, and glad to have you back to talk about that project or other projects as they come to
yeah,
be. It's always a good conversation about art and creating and writing. So I appreciate you coming back as well.
thanks for having me, Jason. It's fun.
Anytime, anytime. Thanks so much.
All right, man.